Okay, most of what you're about to hear is verbatim from Wikipedia. Within the mystical system of Thelema, the abyss is the great gulf or void between the phenomenal world of manifestation and its nominal source. In Aleister Crowley's words, this doctrine is difficult to explain, but it corresponds more or less to the gap in thought between the real, which is ideal, and the unreal, which is actual. In the abyss, things exist indeed, at least in posse, but are without any possible meaning, for they lack the substratum or spiritual reality. They are appearances without law. They are thus insane delusions. Now, the abyss being thus the great storehouse of phenomena, it is the source of all impressions. In the Kabbalistic system of Crowley, the abyss contains the 11th Sheden, or Sephirah, Darth, which separates the lower Sephirah from the supernals. It represents the fall of man, as in Genesis, from a unified consciousness into a duality between ego and divine nature. The abyss is guarded by the demon Chronozone, who represents those parts of one's consciousness that are unwilling or unable to enter the divine. Crossing the abyss is regarded as a perilous operation and most important work of the magician's career. Success confers graduation into the degree Magister Templi, or Master of the Temple. At this stage, the adept takes the oath of the abyss, where he swears to take absolutely everything that happens as a direct communication of the divine with your soul. So, in other words, anyone who happens to talk to you, a song that maybe is playing as you walk into a room, a cough or a noise that appears to respond to a thought that you just had. Since many would interpret this type of behaviour as that of a paranoid schizophrenic, and in all fairness, if you are paranoid about this process, it's only natural that you would end up losing your sanity in the end. So, the adept is required to be prepared for the experience. Many people nowadays refer to these types of experiences as synchronicities, and we'll examine that more later on. So, with this brief understanding, and I cannot stress the word brief enough, that we have of the abyss and of the oath in which the adept is required to forget everything that he or she ever learnt, let us examine just a few occurrences of the abyss in pop culture that are of course relevant to our findings concerning the 9/11 ritual. In the TV series Andromeda, the spirit of the abyss, also referred to as the darkness, is the leader of the Magog, who worship the abyss as their creator. In the series, the abyss is able to possess its host and possibly manifest things, and is made of negative matter. The abyss resides in a dimension where mind is everything and matter is nothing. Also noteworthy is the fact that when the abyss possesses its hosts, implanting radical isotopes in them, they experience a sense of euphoria while possessed. So, does this sound familiar? Well, it should, because, for instance, Aleister Crowley describes the abyss as the gap in thought between the real, which is ideal, and the unreal, which is actual, while the spirit of the abyss in the TV series Andromeda resides in a dimension where mind is everything and matter is nothing. I think it's fair to say that the correlation here is obvious, to say the least. What else can we conclude on the subject of the abyss? In the Andromeda TV series, one standout aspect to the series is the fact that the race of beings that the abyss controls are known as the Magog. The Magog are, of course, the biblical race of beings sent to Earth to destroy the kingdom of Christ, not to mention the Skull and Bones nickname assigned to George H.W. Bush. Finally, when the spirit of the abyss possesses people in the TV series, they experience a state of euphoria. How is this relevant, you might ask? Well, by examining the various occultic rituals of fraternal orders, we have already learned that when it comes to crossing the abyss, a process of death-rebirth takes place. The death of the ego and the rebirth of the adept into oneness with the universal all, or Pan. Another name for this state would be Christ consciousness. The adept, then, is commanded only by the spirit, or Pan, and due to the shedding of his or her ego. Therefore, it can accurately be claimed that what this process is in fact possession. So, while under possession, the adept is said to be at one with the all, which is exactly the type of terminology you would come to expect from someone who's attempting to define a euphoric experience. Therefore, tying us immediately back to the Andromeda TV series, where the entity, known as the Abyss, possesses people who, while under possession, experience euphoria. Many who have undertaken the death rebirth experience would argue that by calling this process possession, I'm taking the experience completely out of context, because the force that they are bonding their spirit to is the divine, the all, a benevolent force that is everything and everyone that exists, and basically what some would call God. Now, I don't personally claim to know whether or not this is in fact true or not, but I do, however, have some questions that I feel need to be asked concerning this force that you bond yourself with as a part of this ritual. Question 1 would be, just because some kind of force or entity has the ability to show you new realms or experiences and make you feel in awe and euphoric as you surrender yourself to it, how can you truly be sure that it has your or other life forms' best interest at heart? Question 2 is, if this force is so divine, then why does it require secret ceremonies and rituals from those that bond themselves with it? And question 3, if you were some powerful entity that has a malevolent desire to possess a person or a group of people, but cannot do so without their acquiescence, would you A, tell them your intentions and just hope that they agree, or B, trick them by using various techniques to make them believe that it is in their best interest to join you, like letting them experience euphoria, for instance? Strictly speaking, of course, these questions are rhetorical, the point being that it's probably not wise to give yourself to something based on the fact that it exhibits godlike powers or offers you new experiences, especially if this force desires you to carry out certain tasks, like mass murder, under the pretense that this is somehow for the greater good of humanity. It is my personal belief that this force has been doing this exactly, and shortly I'll explain why I've drawn this conclusion. Before I do so, I wish to examine a biblical demon that goes by the name of Legion in the New Testament. Personally, I'm not religious, but I do, however, feel that the New Testament is one book in particular that contains much misinterpreted truth. One interesting example of a truth from this book is in Luke 8:26-39, which talks of Jesus casting a demon from a man into a herd of swine. When Jesus asks him, the demon, what his name is, it replies, "We are legion, for we are many." Now, here is where things get interesting. Legion then proceeds to beg Christ not to send it into the abyss, and instead asks to be cast into the herd of swine, which Jesus does so. So here we have a story of a collective demonic consciousness begging Christ not to send it into the abyss. The Bible also states that Satan will be imprisoned in the abyss prior to the return of Christ for 1,000 years, not to mention the fact that it also states that the beast will get much of his great power from demons when they ascend out of the abyss. Now, forgive me for my biblical tangent, but it was necessary to further solidify my point concerning the abyss and roughly what it appears to be. Clearly, it is associated with a demonic presence, and in the Bible, possibly some kind of breeding ground for demons or a collective demonic consciousness. This seems to correlate somewhat with my view of what the abyss appears to be, and to understand that we're going to have to briefly summarise what Christ is or means in terms of the occult.